In my previous message, we talked about why we should keep praying. If you haven't watched it, I would encourage you to do so. But maybe you have watched it and you believe it, but you're still dealing with so many issues like doubt and frustration and feelings of abandonment. I think we've all been there, right? Has God truly forgotten us? Is he busy answering other prayers and not ours? Is our prayer insignificant? Does he understand how hard it is each day because the things that we've been praying for only seem to be magnified? They're getting worse, not better. Well, the Bible has a lot to say about this through example and word. Stick with me. You don't want to miss it. On one Sunday morning, when I was about 8 or 9, I remember walking out into the parking lot after church to find that my parents, along with all 3 of my siblings, were gone. All the cars had cleared out and I was left alone. I remember finding this light post in the middle of the parking lot and I held onto it. And I was still clinging to this light post when my parents finally came back to get me. They had gotten about halfway home until they realized I was not with them. You wonder if God has forgotten you. You cry out for the umpteenth time, does he care? Is he going to come to my rescue? Well, the Bible has a lot to say about this. So let's first look at it through the lens of some biblical patriarchs and their plights. It took 25 years for God to fulfill his promise of a son to Abraham. It was 14 years from the time that Joseph was sold as a slave to Egypt before becoming second in command in Egypt. From the time that David was anointed as king of Israel until usurping the throne, 15 years had passed. And a lot of things had happened in those 15 years. It was 40 years from the time of God's promise of a land for Israel to when they captured it. So the question then is, had God forgotten them? No, never. Then again, how can we be sure that God hasn't forgotten us? What truths does the Bible present to us in our waiting? Here are 3 things. First, and most importantly, God never forgets. The word never in that sentence should be highlighted. During the time of the Israelites' captivity, God sent them word by way of Isaiah the prophet. And this is what he said in Isaiah 49:15 through 16. Can a mother forget her nursing child? Can she feel love for the child she has born? But even if that were possible, I would not forget you. See, I have written your name on the palms of my hands. Always in my mind is a picture of Jerusalem's walls in ruins. In other words, God is saying, can a mother really forget a child nursing at her breast? No. And if it does happen, which it can happen, we know that it can happen. Even if it does happen, I will not forget you because your name is written on the palm of my hands. I think this promise is broad in nature. First of all, God promised that he was going to rebuild Jerusalem after the Babylonians destroyed it. And he promised to bring the people back from captivity. And then the greatest prophecy of all is that he promised to bring a Messiah to deliver his people. For centuries, the Israelites waited for their promised Messiah, and they went through many things during that time, many hardships. 400 years in Egypt, 40 years living in the desert, battles, some they won, some they lost, captivity twice, prophetic messages, and 400 years of silence. No word from God, no visions, no angel visits, nothing. And then by the 1st century, Israel was under Roman rule. Then we read in Romans 5:8. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. You see, God made good on his promise. He did bring the Messiah to come and deliver his people. He hadn't forgotten. You are his too. He describes his love for you throughout the Bible. Paul writes in Romans 8:38, I am convinced that nothing can separate us from God's love. So he has not forgotten you. He will not leave you clinging to a light post in the middle of a parking lot. He has not forgotten your prayer. Hold on to that today. The second reason why we know that God has not forgotten us is that God is sovereign. God is sovereign. The word sovereign means having supreme rank, power, and authority. The psalmist writes in Psalm 103:19, the Lord has made the heavens his throne. From there he rules over everything. There's not a better passage that describes the sovereignty of God than Colossians 1:15-20. You may want to pore over this passage on your own sometime. But in verse 15, Paul writes, Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. That means that he is sovereign over us, his created beings. His sovereignty means that he can do whatever he wants. He's not bound by anything, and he has complete freedom to do as he sees fit. He is omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, omnipresent, always present everywhere. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He is the great I am. With that said, his sovereignty keeps him remembering, keeps him from forgetting those that he loves. We read in Proverbs 16:9, we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. So yes, the Lord is sovereign over you and your situation. And the third reason why God hasn't forgotten is that God has a timetable and it's perfect. The Apostle John focuses on God's timetable in his gospel account. Several times throughout his book, he mentions a situation like the religious leaders trying to arrest Jesus. But John says, but his time had not yet come. But during those last few days, John writes that his time had now come. What was that time? His time to die. From the moment that Jesus arrived on the scene, he was on a mission that would end in death. He came to die. But no matter how many times the religious leaders wanted to arrest him and kill him, it would not happen until the appointed time. Jesus was on a heavenly timetable. You and I are also on a heavenly timetable. John writes in John 15:19, the world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it, but you are no longer part of the world. Since we are called out of the world, we are on a different system with a different destiny. While the Israelites may have wanted their Messiah on that day, Paul writes in Galatians 4:4, but when the right time came, God sent his son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God has a specific time for your prayers to be answered, and it is the perfect time. Just trust that he's orchestrating things right now and putting all the pieces together for a glorious outcome. I am so grateful to be on God's timetable. How about you? The question now becomes, what do we do in the meantime? Well, I believe that the best thing that we can do is to wait patiently, trusting, hoping, and believing. And while you wait, you may want to adopt the lyrics to John Waller's song, While I'm Waiting. I'm waiting on you, Lord, and I'm hopeful, though it is painful, but patiently I will wait. I will move ahead, bold and confident, taking every step in obedience. While I'm waiting, I will serve you. While I'm waiting, I will worship. While I'm waiting, I will not faint. I'll be running the race, even while I'm waiting. I'm waiting on you, Lord, and I'm peaceful. I'm waiting on you, Lord, though it's not easy, but faithfully I will wait. Yes, I will wait.